What's up? What's up? Thought I'd hop on the camera quick and talk a little bit about a book I just finished reading, Jane Eyre, the classic. I also finished watching one of the movies. There's like a million adaptations to this one, so I picked one and watched it. And yeah, I'll just try to give you guys a summary and my initial thoughts, impressions. So that being said, there will be massive spoilers. And there are a few reveals throughout Jane Eyre. So if you are planning on reading it, don't spoil it, okay? Just click away. Anyways, Jane Eyre starts off with a girl. I think she's like 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. And she is an orphan, okay? Both her parents are dead. And she lives with her aunt and her aunt's kids, so her cousins, I guess. And they mistreat her quite badly. She has this one incident where she is being bullied by her cousins, and then she's put by her aunt in the red room, and everything's always her fault. So she gets blamed for all sorts of household dilemmas and strifes and different conflicts, and it's all Jane's fault all the time. And they think she's a liar because she's like trying to tell the truth about her cousins being awful. And she gets put in the red room and thinks she sees a ghost or something, and has this traumatic, like little kid experience. And that just kind of shapes her childhood, and that's her memory of everything, is just this being picked on and bullied and kind of mistreated. Anyway, as soon as she can, the aunt ships Jane Eyre away to this like charity school, which has terrible conditions. Okay, it's called Lowood. I think Lowood Charity School or Lowood School for Girls or something like that. She gets shipped away to this school. It's basically like a convent kind of, but yeah, like really bad conditions. Like they don't really get much to eat. Their day is like strictly regimented on like every quarter of the hour or something. Like it's very, very strict. And they kind of beat you if you don't follow the rules, and all sorts of things if you don't like clean your nails properly or something. Maybe that's just from the movie, I don't know. But yeah, they just kind of she goes from the frying pan into the fire, basically, from moving from her aunt's to this girl's school. Anyway, she makes a friend there. Her name's Helen. Okay, Helen Burns. And Helen is kind of a saint. She's very, very sweet. I think a little bit older than Jane, and so kind of helps integrate her into the society of girls that are at the school. And she bears her punishment very nobly. She's very pious, and she kind of accepts the mistreatment at the school, and kind of says that it's for her own good, and it kind of accepts her lot. And so there's a bit of like a religious dilemma, I guess, going on for Jane, whether or not to speak up against the injustice or just kind of accept that and just use it for what it's worth. Anyways, eventually, I'm not sure exactly if it's tuberculosis or some other illness, just wrecks like the entire school. And so a bunch of people catch it. I think Jane does not catch it, or if she does, she just gets over it pretty quick. Anyways, Helen is like very sick, so she sneaks out and like sleeps in the same bed as Helen in the infirmary for one night, and then when she wakes up, just to keep Helen warm, right, because Helen's like dying. And then in the morning, Helen is dead, and she wakes up next to her corpse, and it's like a very sad scene. Yeah. Anyways, we get like a time cut after Helen's death, and Jane is now 18, so she's been at Lowood, I think 8 years, something like that. 6 years as a student, and then 2 years as a teacher. So eventually, apparently because she has no relatives, right? So no one to care for her or anything. So she just kind of stays at this school, nowhere to go. And eventually, she becomes old enough and kind of skilled enough to become a teacher. She develops lots of good skills while she's there. Of course, she studies all the basics, arithmetic, grammar, all those things. She also studies French. So she learns how to speak French, and she also learns how to draw very well, which do kind of come into play later. And then after, I don't know if there's any reason why she does this, but eventually she's like, okay, I can't stay here forever. So she advertises in the newspaper kind of silently without telling anybody, looking for a job. I have these skills, please write to me. And so this one lady writes to her, Mrs. Fairfax, saying, hey, we want you to be like a live-in tutor, which is called a governess. Come to this address at this time. The salary is £30 a year or something like that. See you on this date. And so she takes her leave at Lowood and heads to the new place, which is Thornfield. I hope I'm not messing that up. That's like Thornfield. And so on her way there, she's walking. think is it her very first day? Or it might be later. Oh man, now I'm messing up the timeline. Okay, no, my mistake. She goes there, she doesn't meet Mr. Rochester yet. She goes there, it's a giant mansion, hall, house, and not a lot of people live there. It's kind of, what would you call, kind of decrepit, but not totally decrepit, just kind of like not perfectly cared for. A little bit lackluster. But anyways, it's very grand and large, and there's a few people living there. There's John and his wife Leah, I think her name is. They're just like some servants. There's Mrs. Fairfax, who's kind of like the main caretaker, old lady. She's the one that wrote to Jane to bring her in. And then there is one other lady named Grace Poole, who's kind of like a unknown figure. She's kind of like, we learned, that's one of the big reveals about Grace is later. And then there is Adele, and Adele is the, I don't know how old she is, like 6, 8, something like that, this little girl, and that's why Jane is coming to Thornfield, is to teach Adele school stuff, to be her tutor. And Adele only speaks French, or she speaks very bad English, so Adele is very, very happy that Jane is coming and can speak French, so they kind of get along very well. The next kind of big thing that happens is Jane's out for a walk, and this is where she meets Mr. Rochester, who is the heir, or the owner, or the master of Thornfield Hall. He's kind of coming back on his horse with his dog Pilot, and his horse, I think, slips on ice or something and falls, and Jane is out for a walk and watches this happen. She doesn't know who he is. She offers to help him. Whatever, they have a brief conversation. She's like, that guy's kind of interesting, kind of weird. And then he takes off that same night. Mrs. Fairfax is like, oh, like the master's home. She's like, oh, what, really? And then she meets him, and she's like, whoa, it's the same guy that fell off his horse. So there's like this weird little small world moment, I guess, kind of connection. I guess I'll note it now. It's one thing that the book is pretty particular about, or makes very obvious, is that both Jane and Mr. Rochester are like plain looking, like not totally downright ugly, but like not attractive conventionally, which I think is an interesting plot point, because most of our, like, I mean, I don't really read a lot of romances, but I am in the culture enough to know that romances are typically between two like attractive people, like the hottest guy gets the hottest girl, and that's the steamy romance, right? Or even if it's not explicitly mentioned, it's kind of just assumed that everyone involved is attractive. But no, the book makes explicit that the characters are plain, or not, yeah, like I said, kind of not attractive. And so the reason I mentioned that now, I guess, is because Jane's initial impressions of Mr. Rochester are like not necessarily like completely favorable, although that does change throughout the course of the book. Okay, I gotta speed it up here. Holy, we're at 8 minutes already. 6? 8 minutes. Okay, speed it up. What happens next? Basically, Mr. Rochester starts to call on Jane more often in the evenings to chat, and apparently he likes her company. Mr. Rochester is not known to stick around the house for long, usually stays for 2 or 3 weeks, then takes off again. He has like this odd history no one really knows, or they know about it, but like kind of only smattering, little bits and pieces. He lives some sort of licentious lifestyle on the mainland. I should mention this is all happening in England. And so he's been to like France and Italy and all these different places. And so he kind of just goes around wherever he wants. Now, one evening, Jane is not being able to sleep, and she smells smoke. There's like a crazy laugh that sounds maniacal. And she's already suspicious of Grace Poole, because Grace she's only seen her like a couple times. And so she runs out, and Mr. Rochester's passed out. I think maybe he like drank some wine or something. He's not waking up, and his bed is on fire. So she wakes him up, pours water on his face, like pours water on the curtains. They get the fire out, and Mr. Rochester's like, whoa, thank you very much. They have like this moment where they look into each other's eyes, I think. And then he's like, don't speak of this to anybody. And then in the morning, he kind of just says that, oh, I left a candle lit, which Jane knows to be a lie. She suspects Grace Poole. Reader doesn't really know what's going on. It's a mystery. After that, I'm gonna mess this part up, I think. Okay, some more things might happen. But eventually, yes, okay, so there's this big party that comes over to Thornfield Hall, so they have to like make the whole place up ready, and a bunch of families are there. They're all hanging out. They're kind of like young, rich socialites, and one of them is Lady Ingram, and I forget her first name now. Anyways, Blanche Ingram, and she's like talk of the town, like she's the hottest girl. Mr. Rochester is always hanging out with her. They're always like going for carriage rides and playing billiards and always playing duets on the piano. It's very like, everyone expects them to be married. That's the whole plan, except for the fact that Jane just soon discovers that Blanche doesn't actually love him. And during this time, they've kind of had a few more like quasi-romantic moments, like, could this be a thing? And then Jane's like, no, it's not. You're a fool. She's like talking to herself. We don't know Mr. Rochester's perspective. It's all written from Jane's perspective. But she's kind of wishy-washy. She loves Mr. Rochester, but she doesn't know. Obviously, there's this difference in rank, where she's just a governess and he's like this master of this big hall. So there's this massive status gap between the two. And there's also a massive age gap too. Mr. Rochester is like almost 40 and she's 18. So make of that what you will. Anyways, Blanche Ingram and all these other people are over. Jane is kind of tortured watching them interact and socialize. Rochester is always asking her to come and sit and like stay with the party. She's obviously very uncomfortable because she feels the difference in status very strongly. And she's like, oh well, Blanche is so beautiful. Of course they're gonna get married. Mr. Rochester's like, yep, we're getting married. That's the whole thing. I'm gonna be married very soon. And so it looks like it's over for Jane. Then Mr. Rochester reveals that, hey, the marriage that I'm going to have is actually not to Blanche, it's to you. I love you. And they are like, oh, I think there's like this, she can't believe it's real. And they kind of have this funny like banter relationship where they're kind of just like harsh to each other a little bit. And they kind of like that. And Mr. Rochester likes that she's kind of spunky to him. Anyways, there's a small detail that ends up being bigger of a detail later. That's one of his friends from South Africa. Mr. Rochester's friends from South Africa shows up, stays the night, gets stabbed somehow, and so Jane is taken out of bed by Mr. Rochester and said, hey, like, you gotta sponge the blood off this guy for like 3 hours while I go get the surgeon. And then he's patched up. His name's Mason. He's patched up and then sent off again, and she's like, what the heck? Anyways, they're gonna be married in 1 month. 1 month passes by. It's all lovey-dovey. And then they go to she gets her veil on, the night before, she sees like this vampire creature that rips her veil in the middle of the night. She thinks it's a ghost, but then she's like, no, I really saw it. The veil is ripped. She wakes up in the morning and the veil is ripped. She's like, well, that's really scary. She tells Mr. Rochester and he's like, okay, don't worry about it. Let's just go get married. And so they rush to the church. They're literally getting married. And then the priest is like, is there any objections? Somebody walks in from the back and says, there's an objection. And this is the big reveal, is that Mr. Rochester is already married. He married like 10 years ago or whatever, or 15 years ago to this lady in South Africa. The marriage cannot proceed. It's bigamy. And it's Mason that is the one that made this objection. So Mr. Rochester is like, okay, I'm going to reveal everything. Come now to the house. And so he walks everyone, the priest included, Mason, Jane, everybody, walks them all up to the top of Thornfield Hall, and Grace Poole opens the door, but it's not Grace Poole that he's married to. Grace Poole is just there to like take, to keep the rest of the house safe. The real problem is this lady, his old wife. I forget her name, I should remember that. Anyways, his wife went mad, she's crazy, and she like tries to kill people all the time, and she like has no sanity, and she's just like utterly deranged. And the reason why he's married to her is because his brother and father, who I think are now dead, they arranged the marriage knowing that her mother and her grandmother were both crazy, but they didn't care. She had a fortune, they wanted the fortune, they arranged the marriage. He didn't really get to meet her much. They got married. Shortly after the marriage, she went insane, and yeah, now he's stuck in the marriage because she's not dead, right? And you couldn't really divorce in those days. So then Jane is utterly heartbroken, but she is very strict with her morals, right? She's not willing to like live as his concubine mistress. She wants to be married, and if she can't be married, it's not going to go. So she packs up like a piece of bread and like one pair of clothes and like leaves in the middle of the night, that same night, and just runs away. And she's like, my life is over. Like, she's just so, I wouldn't say dramatic, but she acts very hastily. Anyhow, she forgets her like one package of food and clothes on the carriage, spends the last of her money on this carriage, gets off and like forgets her stuff on there. So she's literally destitute. She just has this clothes on her back. And then she literally is reduced to the point of like almost death. So she's homeless. She's like trying to beg for food. She like gets one meal a day somehow by begging. She's like basically gonna die from exposure and like hunger and stuff. And then she ends up in this random town. And then she just walks to like die on a hill, sees a house that has a candle in the window, walks to it. The lady at the door won't let her in because she thinks she's some sort of like vagrant or like thief. And so then she just collapses on the doorstep, and then one of the men of the house comes home, sees her collapsed there, brings her in, and she's saved from death by this random guy. After like a month or like a while, she recovers. Oh man, I did forget some details. Earlier, okay, cutting back to before she tried to marry Rochester, she got a message from her aunt that her aunt was dying. So she goes to visit her aunt for a month, and her aunt reveals that she does have a living relative. He wrote to her 3 years ago, and she never gave Jane the letter. So then, as the aunt is dying, she just says, look in the drawer, here's the letter. And so Jane now has this letter that she can respond to for her last living relative. Anyways, cut back to the scene where she's just saved. She recovers from her starvation in this random person's house. There's 2 girls and a guy, and they're brothers and sisters. The guy is like a chaplain or like a, what would you call it, like a priest. And the 2 girls, I think, are just like rich. They just stay home and study stuff. Anyway, this girl, Jane, is like, hey, I have to earn my keep. So she, after a month, the priest puts her up in this tiny little house, and she starts a school for girls, which is awesome. She loves it, but it's kind of like she can never really fully enjoy the situation because she just loves Mr. Rochester. After a while, it's revealed, and it's kind of like it's built up to this, so it's another big reveal. But the house that she's staying in with the priest and the 2 girls, those are her cousins. So Mr. Rivers is her cousin, and then, well, I guess they're all her cousins. But yeah, anyways, so she is like super, super, super happy about this because this means that she has living relatives. It's also revealed that this guy that she had the letter to from her aunt that her aunt never gave to her, that guy died and willed everything to her. So now she's like crazy rich. So now she's like, well, what should I do? She doesn't know any news about Mr. Rochester. She's written to Mrs. Fairfax many times, no response. So she doesn't know what's going on. However, Mr. Rivers, the chaplain guy, who's her cousin, really wants to go be a missionary in India. So he's been studying, they call it like Hindustani or something, like Indian, Sanskrit, I think it is. Studying to speak Sanskrit so he can go be a missionary in India. And he has a really strong sense of like religious duty. And he like proposes to Jane, and it's like, I know I'm your, well, I guess that them being cousins doesn't really matter, right? They're just trying to keep it in the family. But he's like, yeah, I know we don't love each other, but you have this duty to God and this opportunity to be a missionary, and you have to come with me to India. And he's like, actually, I kind of got a little bit grossed out. Like, he was just like super, super pushy about it. And it was like using God as a justification for like take her to India. I don't know. Like he was doing it from pure motives, but I think I just didn't really like appreciate how like pushy he was about it. Anyway, she keeps turning him down because deep down she wants to marry for love because she loves Rochester, and she's like, I can't go to India. I'll go to India as your sister, but I can't go to India as your wife because I just love somebody else. And so eventually, like, they are kind of deciding they're gonna go, and then she like hears Mr. Rochester's voice calling her name in like a dream at night. But it's not a dream, but it's some sort of like psychic connection they have. Anyways, she's like, I have got to go check on this guy. Like, I can't wait any longer. So she like uses her newfound fortune to like get all her stuff ready and like get a carriage, and she just heads out back to Thornfield just to see what's going on. And Thornfield is desolate. It's been like razed to the ground, burnt, and so she's like, what the heck? She asks like the local innkeeper in the area, like, what's going on? He's like, oh, you don't know? Yeah, like the place burned down like a year ago. Then she discovers it burned down like the day after, or like a few days after she left. And she also learns that Mr. Rochester got like burned his eyes out and like broke. Did he lose one of his hands? Yeah, he lost one of his hands. And that his crazy wife jumped down from the top floor while it was burning. He was trying to save her, which is why he got all the injuries, which is a very noble thing, right? Like the one thing that's like tying him and preventing him from like marrying Jane, he tries to save his wife, which is like a good thing. Anyways, she jumps on the top floor and dies. So now he's single and ready to mingle, which is not escaped, or is not lost on Jane. She realizes that. And so she's like, well, I gotta find this guy. He's staying at some summer house he has in like this other district, like a few miles away. She goes to visit him, and he's blind, and has to be waited on by, I think, John and Leah. His servants are still with him, and he's like completely broken as a man, right? He's just like sad and just like despondent, and so usually Leah waits on him, like brings him food and water, but Jane takes the tray instead and is like, well, here's your water. And he's like, I'm dreaming, I must be dreaming. And they have this really great like reunion moment, and they get married. And of course there's that famous line at the end. I don't want to mess it up, but this is like the classic. I mean, all books end in death or marriage, right? So you have this really great ending where it says, "Reader, I married him. A quiet wedding we had, he and I." Anyways, it's a famous line, by the way. "Reader, I married him." And it is very satisfying. It's a good book. I liked it. I think I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Now, I did watch the movie as well. Now, when I say the movie, of course, I'm referring to... it's impossible for you to know which one I'm referring to because there's like literally 1,000 adaptations. I was going to watch the 2006 BBC one, but then I realized it was like a 4-hour like miniseries and not one movie, and I'm like, that's too long. And also, I couldn't torrent it. I couldn't find it. So, anyways, I ended up settling for the 1996 one, which once I started watching it, I was very satisfied or happy to see that it's directed by Franco Zeffirelli, who, if you don't know him, I'm not really a film guy. I don't know directors or actors or anything like that. But Franco Zeffirelli directed 3 Shakespeare plays, Taming of the Shrew, Hamlet, and Romeo and Juliet. The Romeo and Juliet one is very famous. And I've watched all 3, and I thought they were amazing. The set design is always great. He always pulls directly from the book and makes it as accurate as possible. So I was really happy to see that it was the Franco Zeffirelli one. Anyway, the movie was good. There were some things that were very inaccurate about it. Like, for example, the whole plot point of, like, Mr. Rivers being, like, her cousin that... like wants to go to India and like uses like God as his justification for their marriage. That whole romance plot is like lost. There's nothing in there about that really. What else did they miss? There's just a few things that were just like, and fair enough, right? Movies aren't 3 hours. Well, nowadays they are, but back in 1996, movies were not. They're under 2 hours, right? So Franco Zeffirelli was like really having. Maybe if he made it 20 minutes longer, he could have fit all that stuff in, but he was working with a time budget, so fair enough. I don't hate him for those alterations. In terms of casting, I think Jane was cast amazingly because at the beginning of the movie, I was like, bro, this chick's ugly. Like, I had no sympathy for her, really. Well, I did as like a human being, but like, usually we're used to actresses like being hot, right? And she just wasn't. And I was just like, what the heck? But by the end of the movie, I thought she was beautiful. And so by the plot and everything that she experienced, I was able to like see that transformation and like be on her team. And yeah, I thought she was awesome at the end. So yeah, that was a really great character arc, I guess. Whether or not Mr. Rochester was well cast will be up to the ladies. You have to ask them. He's not supposed to be attractive based on the book. Is he attractive in the movie? I don't know. He seemed fine to me. Anyways. Do I have more to say? Not really. Would I recommend it? Yes. Can I speak to the movie? There's so many, I only watched one, so I can't tell you. But yeah, this is a long video. I've been yapping. But Jane Eyre, it's a classic. Charlotte Bronte, thank you. Will I be reading more romances? Only if they're classics. So yes. But when? I don't know. Okay, thanks for watching. Jane Eyre. See you later.